Good evening, producer Susan. How are you this fine day?
I'm doing well, Jersey Joe. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. It's a summer in New Jersey, but still very pleasant. Spent a
It
week in
is
Atlantic.
nice.
Yep, spent a week in Atlantic City last week. The water was too cold, but it was a beautiful weather, so just great place to be. Getting ready to go any place exciting?
Dante's Inferno,
Where's that?
otherwise known as Florida.
Oh yeah, been there. Been not my favorite place to go in the summer. So yeah,
Not my favorite place to go either in the summer.
yeah,
It's nice to visit there in like January.
yeah.
But I understand there's a holiday coming up this week.
Holiday this week? Not that I
Isn't
can.
there an important holiday coming up on Friday?
I don't know if it's important. I mean, I'm going to be another year older on Friday, but I don't know if that's important or not. But if you want to send me a cigar to commemorate the occasion, that'll, be greatly appreciated. All right. All right. You want to hear what we're going to talk about this week or try to
Yeah,
talk about?
what's on the agenda?
Well, I got an awful lot to anyway. Today is Monday, June 3rd. And our quote of the week is an anonymous, but it's why you should never be ashamed about the type of work you do. In our stupidest thing I've heard all week, we'll tell you why a Seattle school district decided to shut down their gifted and talented student program. You're familiar with those programs, right?
Yep, yep.
All right. We'll tell you how soon 9 million people living in Mexico City might run out of water and ask you what you think will happen when it does. We'll tell you what happened to you heard about the pier that the U.S. Army built and got to in Gaza to let ships offload humanitarian supplies.
Yeah.
After 11 days after it was built, it broke apart and sank, right?
Oh no, I didn't hear that part.
We'll tell you all about that anyway. Yeah, it was only in operation for 11 days before it completely broke apart and some of it sank. Anyway, we'll tell you about changes in voter registration data in one of the six key swing states that will determine who our next president is. We'll tell you what's happening to the average age of cars on the road in this country. We'll tell you how the percentage of teenagers who had a part-time job in this part-time or summer job has changed in the past 40 years. And we'll tell you how the why inflation is hurting the viability of the Social Security system. And of course, we're going to end with our taxpayer relief chat. You think we're going to fit that all in?
It sounds like a lot. And by the way, if anybody ever told you that dogs don't know how to tell time, they definitely do. It's dinner time.
And and your dog wants to be fed.
And there my dog's trying to tell me it's time for dinner.
All right. All right. So here's the quote by Anonymous. I just thought it was a great quote, which was never be ashamed of the type of work you do. Working for a small salary is always more honorable than waiting for somebody to give you money. What do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely.
And remember Martin Luther King, he talked about being if you're a street sweeper, you should strive to be the best street sweeper you could be. You remember that from his I Have a Dream speech?
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, and again, you should never be, no matter what the job is you do, you should never be ashamed because it's honest, it's honorable work, and it's certainly more honorable than waiting for somebody to give you money for doing nothing. All
Mhm.
right. Um, you want to move on to the stupidest thing I've heard all week?
What's the stupidest thing you heard this week?
Now you're familiar with talented and gifted student programs, right? Where kids with
Yep,
certain
yep,
grades and SAT scores
yep.
they put them in it. I was in one advanced placement, whatever, and it's kind of really it's like you're taking calculus in 10th grade and stuff. But boy, the Seattle public school system had one of those, and it was in operation for 3 years. And again, it was all these advanced courses, calculus, advanced algebra, advanced physics. They decided to shut it down. You know why they shut it down?
Why is that? Funding?
No, they had plenty of money. They determined that there wasn't enough diversity in the program, that there were too many white and Asian students, and not enough students of color had qualified to participate in the program. So they shut it down because it wasn't diverse enough. How freaking stupid is that?
Now, let me ask you this. If there was a similar, a counter program, which we have in our schools, that for those children that need additional help, if that program wasn't diverse enough, would they have shut that program down?
Well, of course not. Obviously not. I mean, but that has to qualify. So you're going to deprive these kids who, were hardworking enough, bright enough, smart enough to benefit and I can look back. I tell you, I benefited greatly from that, the advanced courses that I was in. So you're going to deprive these kids who would benefit from these advanced courses because there's not enough students of color, uh, meeting the criteria to enter these programs. Talk about whatever happened. I'm going to go back to Martin Luther King. Remember, the goal was to have a colorblind society. Is this the
Mhm.
opposite of a colorblind society?
Absolutely.
So I'm just shaking my head. I mean, do you think this qualifies as the stupidest thing you've heard all week?
It's definitely up there for sure.
Okay, so anyway, so if you want to, and producer Susan, I'll give you the link to this story if you want to post it on the website. But to me, this is absolutely moronic that you're depriving kids, who are talented and gifted. And by the way, not everybody has, the same IQ. The IQ of 100 is an average. Some people are less, some people are more. So there's no such thing as equality in terms of intellect or ability to learn, and to pretend that there is and that everything has to be, the difference between one difference, there's many, but one difference between conservatives and progressives is that conservatives want everybody to have an equal opportunity. Progressives want equal outcomes. And given the differences between people's intellect, motivation, capabilities, skills, you cannot have equal outcomes unless you restrict and hold back the people who are capable of exceeding. And that's exactly what you're seeing here. So that's the stupidest thing I've heard all week. Anything you want to add before we move on?
Yeah, I'm just curious to know if they have, counter programs for those who need extra help.
I don't know. I'll send you the link, and I didn't, I don't recall seeing that in the article. Maybe there's other articles, but again, I just thought it was tragic that they're killing the program because there wasn't enough diversity. All right. Anyway, Mexico is one of the largest cities in this hemisphere. It's got 9 million people, which is more than New York City at 7 million
Yeah.
people, by the way. Mexico, the whole central region of Mexico, where Mexico City is, has been suffering from a severe drought for more than a year now, and their reservoirs are running dry. They've had water rationing in effect for months now, and they're predicting, however, that unless they get some monsoonal rains, that the water supplies continue to, and they are predicting, some experts believe a condition called zero water could be achieved as early as June 26th, which
That's
is
just a couple weeks away.
3 weeks away. Now, if they in fact get to the point of zero water, you turn the tap on, no water, there's no water to drink, no water to cook with, no water to flush your toilet. What do you think those 9 million people, where do you think those 9 million people are going to go?
They're certainly going to vacate.
They're certainly going to vacate. And where do you think at least some of them will head?
I'm going to guess that some of them are going to head north to the United States border.
And if 2 or 3 million people show up from Mexico City, show up on the southern U.S. border, what do you think Biden administration will do? I don't have an answer.
I think he's going to let them in
Um,
based on his history.
and what do you
And
think?
looking at the map of this drought, it is affecting not just Mexico City, but it's affecting a major part of Mexico. I believe the only parts not suffering is out like where Cancun is, which is the Yucatan Peninsula, and also Baja,
Yeah,
which is a very, narrow coast. So there's not much other places for them to vacate
yeah,
to outside of Mexico City.
absolutely correct. There's no other places in Mexico that they're going to go to be able to find
Very
water.
limited, very
Very
limited
limited, right?
places.
And what limited water is already there is of course needed by the people who are already living there. So they can't take in 9 million people,
Yeah.
those neighboring communities. So again, it's going to be, and I'm surprised that this impending crisis hasn't gotten more play in the news. Have you heard about it in the news?
I have not heard about it at all, but again, I think based on his history, I think he'll allow these people in.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be an
And I think,
yeah.
we as a nation, we have our own crisis going on in places like Las Vegas that's running out of water.
Right. And even California, by the way. So anyway, so that's the newest crisis that you haven't heard about. So we call this the situation when Jersey Joe News and Perspective. You haven't heard on the TV. Well, I think this is a huge story that you haven't heard about. Now, if it comes to pass in 3 weeks, I'm sure it'll be the number one story on our news and probably even globally that Mexico City has run out of water. But it's just I shake my head why this story hasn't gotten more press. All right. So you were aware that the United States through, had the Biden had the U.S. Army build a $320 million floating pier so that large ships, this is outside the city of Rafah in Gaza, so
Mhm.
that large ships could pull up and offload humanitarian aid, right? You're aware of
Yeah,
that?
yeah.
Well, it was made of like floating pontoon bridges that were
Mhm.
linked together. 11 days after it was constructed, severe weather, high seas, and a storm caused it to break apart, become unmoored. Some of the beaches, some of the sections became beached, other sections sank. Um, Several soldiers were seriously injured. Um, so anyway, so after being in operation for 11 days, the $300 million floating pier broke apart and is now not operational. Did you hear about that in the news?
I did not.
The situation with Jersey Joe, news and perspective you won't hear on TV.
It
So,
makes you wonder how, if this pier failed because of some storms and stuff that, this is our, I don't know, was it the Army Corps of Engineers? I mean, it makes you wonder what's going to happen to
well, and they knew about the
our army.
conditions, by the way, because construction of the pier was delayed because of the identical storms. It's summer, you get summer
Yeah.
thunderstorms. They actually had to halt construction because of these severe summer storms. Well, no sooner did they get it completed, and one of those summer storms that had been happening all along,
And we're not talking hurricanes or anything. We're
no,
talking summer storms.
just summer thunderstorms, blew up and just boom. You might want to say it was a tropical storm, but they were encountering those even before they started building it. So this was not a big surprise. All right. So you want to move on to voter registration statistics?
Yeah, what's going on with we got an election coming up in a couple months.
Right. And you're aware that the election is going to be decided by just 7 swing states, right? The other
Yeah,
40
and Pennsylvania is one of them.
and of those, Pennsylvania is absolutely the biggest. Now let me give you some history on Pennsylvania. Back in 2020, there were 9 million registered voters in the state of Pennsylvania, and they had an incredible turnout. They had a 78% turnout. 7 million of the 9 million registered voters turned out to vote. That's unheard of. 60% was always considered to be a massive turnout. Pennsylvania had a 78% turnout. And President Biden won Pennsylvania by the narrowest of margin out of 7 million votes cast. He won by just 80,000 votes, which is a 1.15% razor thin margin 4 years ago. Now, let's go back to what the stats were back in 2020. Back in 2020, as I said, there were 9,090 registered voters in the state of Pennsylvania. As of April of this year, that number had shrunk by 370,000 down to just 8,700,000. So, where did those 370,000 registered voters go? Well, out of that figure, registered Democrat voters declined by 334,000, which was 90% of the total decline. So out of the total decline, Democrats accounted for 90% of the total decline. Meanwhile, the number of registered Republicans declined by just 43,000, almost nothing. It's almost exactly where it was. So, and I'm puzzled where all those Democrat registered voters have gone, but regardless of where they've gone for Biden, who won the state by the narrowest of margin, those are not good figures or indicators for a swing state that Biden absolutely needs to carry. In fact, I think if
Yeah.
he can't carry Pennsylvania, I don't know if he can win the election. What's your thought on where those?
Yeah, definitely Pennsylvania is probably one of the most key states.
Yeah, I think maybe Michigan is number two, but
Mhm.
um, it's just startling the decline in the number of registered Democrat voters. Now, could it pick up in the next, if there's a voter registration drive, could they gain back some of those lost registered voters? But man, it is just stunning. And by the way, interesting. Once again, if you look at registered Republican. Once again, it's a third, a third, a third. A third are Republican, a third are Democrats, and a third are unaffiliated independents. And as always, it is going to be the unaffiliated independent voters um, who decide the election.
Yeah.
So, um, so it's going to be very, very interesting to see what happens in Pennsylvania. But at this point, it doesn't look good for Biden. And I think we talked 2 weeks ago how uh, in the polls that Trump had pulled ahead of Biden by 1 percentage point in New Hampshire, which has been a solid blue state for the past 20 years. Did we talk about
Yeah.
that? Yeah.
Yep.
So some interesting stats. All right. You want to move on to how old a typical car in the road is?
How old?
Well, you want to take a guess?
I feel like the age has probably decreased significantly. I feel like people don't keep things anymore like they used to.
Well, you would be wrong.
Oh,
When we look at all vehicles, which includes, pickup trucks and, in vans, which get traded in much more frequently. But if we look just at cars, the average age of the passenger vehicle on the road, and which includes SUVs, has gone from 11.2 years, uh, 12 years ago. In 2012 it was 11.2. It's now up to 14 years of age.
wow.
Which means the typical average car. So this is 2024, which means that the average car in the road today is 2010, is a 2010 model. Now, there's a lot of reasons for that. When I was growing up, you'd be lucky to get 80 or 90,000 miles out of a car. The engine would go, the body would rust out. So yes, they're building cars a lot better, but I think you have a combination of cars that are built to last longer, better quality, combined with people not being able to afford to buy a new car. I mean, a lot of people are pumping money into and keeping old cars running. Um, so yeah, 14 years for a car or an SUV is the average age. And by the way, for vans and light trucks, it's 12 years, 11.9.
Yeah,
So
interesting.
interesting. So, and that graph will be in the if you want to post that to the website, producer Susan, that graph will be in the thing. All right.
Absolutely.
So, we talk a lot about inflation. And we've talked about how Social Security is on track to run out of money by 20,000. Have we talked about that before? Social Security running out?
Yeah, and we had some ideas on how to address that deficit too.
Right. Well, right now the trustees of the Social Security Trust Fund are predicting that in just 10 years, the Social Security Trust Fund that currently has 2.7 trillion in it is going to become fully depleted because right now the program is running at a multi-billion-dollar deficit every year, and they're having to tap into the principal of the trust fund to make up the shortfall. And the trustees are saying, hey, at the rate it's going, we're going to run out of completely deplete the trust fund. And we only have enough cash coming in to pay out the promised benefits at the rate of 80 cents on the dollar. Well, here's something they haven't factored in. I know you don't collect Social Security, but do you know that every year everybody in Social Security gets a cost of living adjustment to their
Yes,
benefit?
I did. I did know that.
Right.
Modest. Yes.
And I think last year was like 3.2%. Now, the 2.7 trillion in bonds and US Treasury bonds, you know what the blended average interest rate they've been collecting on those bonds is?
Probably not as high.
No, it's 2.35. And the reason it's so low is they've been buying those bonds over the past 3 or 4 decades, somewhere 20-year bonds, 10-year bonds. And if you go back just 15 years, the interest rate on US Treasury bonds was less than 2%. And for a couple of years, it was less than 1%. So they've got a lot of long-term bonds that have an interest rate of 2% or less, which is why they're currently only getting 2.3. Now, the current interest rate on a 10-year bond is about 4.5%. But the problem is they don't have a whole lot of money to invest in those new bonds because their other money is tied up in the old bonds. The only money they can roll over into a new bond is when one of those old bonds retires, they can take the money that they didn't need to cover the shortfall, and what's ever left over they can put into a new bond. But that's a very slow process. It's like trying to turn an aircraft carrier around. Yeah,
Mhm.
maybe inch by inch, you might be able to bump up that 2.35% by 0.5% per year, but you're not going to jump it from 2.35% to 3.5% in 24 months. It's just not going to happen. So if inflation doesn't get back down close to 2.5%, that spread between the inflation-driven cost of living adjustment, and the bond interest rate is going to continue to pound and diminish and deplete those Social Security reserves. So again, if they don't get it under control, or if it goes back up, the Social Security program won't even make it to 2034. So
Hmm.
that's where we are right now. Last but not least, before we get to our taxpayer relief shot, let's talk about the labor force participation rate for 16 to 19-year-olds. When you were 16 to 19, did you have a job, a summer job, part-time
I
job?
did. Yes, I did.
So did I. So did everybody in my family. Back in 1983, almost 60% of the teenagers between 16 and 19 um, had some sort of either part-time or summer job. I know I had a paper route when I was 14 years old. Um, I can't remember a year from age 14 where I either wasn't working at a part-time job during school or a summer job. Anyway, so we've gone from 60%. Do you know where we are right now?
I feel like it's probably dropped significantly.
Well, you want to guess how far it dropped?
Oh, 20%?
Well, it's down to 38%. At one point, it was down to 26%, and it's come back up just a little tiny bit. But now only 1 in 3 kids between 16 and 19 has a summer job. And I'll tell you one reason I think it is, particularly when it comes to 18 and 19-year-olds. When I was going to college, you're familiar with STEM,
Yes, that is science, technology,
engineering,
engineering, and math
right.
classes.
Back when I was in college in the 70s, only the Guaranteed Federal Student Loan Program was only available to students in STEM curriculums at accredited engineering schools. And then in the 80s, a bunch of Democrats said, well, we ought to open this up to all kids. So now if you're a 19-year-old college student and you have a choice between waiting tables from noon to 10 o'clock every day during your summer break, or just borrowing another 20 grand and spending your summers on the beach with your friends, what do you think a lot of those 19-year-old kids are going to do?
Well, of course, they're going to want to just spend the summer with their friends.
Yes, because why work if you can just borrow more money?
Yeah.
Now, I don't know what other reasons. Maybe kids are your parents more affluent. Any thoughts on why the only 1 in 3 kids is working their part-time or something?
I don't know, because I feel like even if you come from an affluent family, there's lessons to be learned in having a part-time job.
Well, I couldn't agree more, and I'm just shaking my head as to why only 1 in 3 teenagers these days has either a part-time job or summer job. I'm just shaking my head. And when I see them on the beach, you look at these, when I see the newscasts and whatnot, on a Wednesday afternoon, when they do the news, of course, does the Jersey Shore, they have these on site, and I'm
Mhm.
looking on these, Jersey Shore, on the evening news. Well, it's a great day at the beach today, and they pan the camera, and here's all of these teenagers on the beach on a Wednesday afternoon, and I'm going, why aren't you working? And I'm just shaking my head. Um, anyway, what are your thoughts? Any more thoughts on why kids aren't working?
I don't know. And again, I feel like it doesn't matter your financial status, that you should have a job because it teaches you life skill, not
Yeah.
because you're getting a paycheck.
Right. And it also is going to diminish the amount of money you have to borrow and the amount of debt you're going to have to pay off after you graduate. So I'm just befuddled. And anyway, I don't think it bodes well for a society that only, well, let me put the other way. I think it was good for people's character and values
Yeah,
and work
absolutely.
ethic. I'm glad I worked. I look back, and yes, it was hard work. I sweated a lot. There's other things I could have been doing, but I don't want the experience was a great experience, and I think it helped make me the person I am today. So,
Yeah.
what did you do what was your summer job?
I was a camp counselor.
A camp counselor? Is that a 7 day a week job?
It was a 7 day a week
A week
job.
job. And you got rich. You got rich every summer being a camp counselor, right? Right?
Yeah, yeah, not so much.
Not so much.
But it taught me a lot of very important life skills.
Life skills, absolutely. All right. So you want to move on? How much time we got?
You got about 10 minutes.
All right. So let's talk about taxpayer relief shots. We call them taxpayer relief shots because um, when a thug is arrested, on a serious crime, first thing that happens, he gets court-appointed attorney. And then, of course, there's a trial, and you got a prosecutor and a jury and a judge. So, the trial, a criminal trial, is a minimum 200,000. And then you sentence a guy. If he gets sentenced to jail for 10 years, it's 80,000 a year for 10 years, and then he's going to get probation and whatnot. And I think the sheriff of Santa Rosa County, Florida, has it very, very well. I don't know what I did with that clip, but I'm going to try to find it. I had that clip, and now I can't find it. I'm going to have to just bring it up again. Here's how the sheriff of Santa Rosa County, Florida.
Someone's breaking in your house, you're more than welcome to shoot them in Santa Rosa County. We prefer that you do, actually. Hopefully, you'll save the taxpayers money.
And that's exactly what he's saying, is that, we'd rather you shoot him and kill him rather than us have to, put him on and hold him, put him in jail. And we got a few more. We got our Sheriff Grady Judge out of Polk County. Here we go.
But we have received information in social media that some of the criminals were going to take their criminal conduct into the neighborhoods. I would tell them, if you value your life, you probably shouldn't do that in Polk County, because the people of Polk County like guns. They have guns. I encourage them to own guns, and they're going to be in their homes tonight with their guns loaded. And if you try to break into their homes to steal, to set fires, I'm highly recommending they blow you back out of the house with their guns.
And last but not least, we have one more from the same Sheriff Grady Judd.
I would highly suggest that if a looter breaks into your home, comes into your home while you're there to steal stuff, that you take your gun and you shoot him. You shoot him so that he looks like grated cheese.
All right. And so between Santa Rosa and Sheriff Grady Judge, who's your favorite there?
Oh, I don't know, that they're both good characters.
All right. So let's go to Nashville, Tennessee, where a guy comes home to find somebody in his house who shouldn't be there. Here we go.
A deadly home invasion in South Nashville, where a homeowner shot and killed a man he says was breaking into his home. Kimberly Davis is live at the scene. And Kimberly, is the homeowner all right?
Amy, good morning. The homeowner is okay, and police tell us that they were responding to a robbery, and instead of finding stolen items, they found a body once they arrived to the scene. Now, what we know so far is that officers responded to a home on the 15,000 block of Old Hickory Boulevard in Nashville. Once they got here, they did find that body. The homeowner is telling police that when he was walking around 11:30 last night, he found an intruder inside his home. He knew he wasn't supposed to be there, so that's when he shot and killed that man. Now, and police are telling me this morning that so far this investigation is still ongoing. They still are working on positively identifying who that intruder is. Once they handle this part of the investigation, they will be turning it over to the district attorney's office. And we're also told at this hour they are not sure if the homeowner will or will not receive any charges. It is still all very ongoing. And once they continue their investigation, they will make that decision whether or not the homeowner will be charged. We will continue to follow this story and bring you the latest information as soon as it becomes available. For now, we are live in Nashville. Kimberly Davis, News Channel 5.
And it's really all about it.
So what do you think? If the homeowner didn't know the guy and the guy was in his house without his permission, do you think there's any basis for filing charges?
Yeah, that's I don't know if Tennessee has a castle doctrine or not, but
they do.
Then yeah, I mean he's protecting himself and protecting his property.
Yeah, the only right, unless there's something more to the story, like he invited the guy in and they had an argument. If it's as presented where he just found this guy in his house at 11 o'clock at night, I don't think there's any basis for charges. But
if he needed to feel threatened.
You need to feel threatened. Well, actually, no. That's the thing about the castle doctrine. You don't need to prove or demonstrate that you felt your life was in danger. The castle doctrine gives you the automatic assumption that you were in danger of serious bodily injury or death. That's the whole principle of the castle doctrine. You don't need to prove that you felt threatened. It was assumed that you had the right to feel threatened. So that's where castle doctrine comes in. Anyway, anything you want to add before we wrap up this session?
What are your plans for your birthday this year?
I've had so many. We just had a big vacation in Atlantic City. We kind of celebrated down there, so I think I'm just going to relax and recover from my 4 days in Atlantic City. How about yourself? You do anything fun this weekend?
Other than going to Dante's Inferno, aka Florida.
All right. You flying or driving?
Both. I'll be flying down and driving back.
All right. Well, be safe both ways, particularly on the drive back. All right, and stop at south of the border for me if they still have those
Oh
things.
yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah,
South of the border.
95. Yeah,
I
been a
95.
few years since I've been there.
All right. Anyway, I want to thank all of you who listen to this podcast for giving up 30 minutes out of your busy day to listen to me ramble on about the things that I find of interest and importance. And I hope you found those topics as interesting and important as I did. And if so, hope you continue to listen to the podcast in the weeks and months to come. If you want to see some of the materials and story links you heard me talk about today, you can find them on the Jerzee Joe website at jerzeejoe.com. Just remember to spell Jerzee, J-E-R, Z as in zebra, E-E, Jerzee, jerzeejoe.com. And if you want to send me an email, just send it to joe at jerzeejoe.com. And with that, producer Susan, unless you have something to add, we will sign off and talk to you again next week. Anything you want to add?
Now I hope you have a good birthday.
I appreciate it, and I'll talk to you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.